Welcome back for the Q&A part of this month's Legacy Planning webinar on charitable lead trusts. I'm John Mitchell, and I serve as Executive Director and CEO of Ardenwood here in San Francisco. Thank you for participating in this fifth segment of our six-part series and for joining us today. Before we begin answering your questions, I want to bring up an important item to include in your estate plan, actually to put in place right now. It's called an Advanced Healthcare Directive, or AHCD. 1 in 5 people, or 18%, do not even know what an Advanced Healthcare Directive is. So let's make sure you're not one of those 18%, please. An Advanced Healthcare Directive provides guidance for your family and loved ones and healthcare professionals in the event you are unable to make your own healthcare decisions. The directive takes the pressure off of making difficult decisions and from what makes it possible to make those decisions, and takes it away from your family members so they know what your wishes are. We will always emphasize the importance of this document. Can't emphasize it enough in terms of what I see every day, truly. And finally, the content shared is only informational, is not intended to be legal advice. A replay of this webinar will be available on our website tomorrow. As a reminder, you can ask questions by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Only we will see the questions. Now, let me reintroduce Rick Bailey. Rick Bailey is the founder and chairman of CAMUS and is one of the most highly renowned estate planners in the United States. As a certified financial planner, or CFP, with a master's degree in accountancy and taxation, as well as a Juris Doctorate, or JD, Rick Bailey is a highly valuable asset to private clients, CPAs, attorneys, financial advisors, and life insurance professionals for his expertise in advanced estate planning and case design. Okay, Rick, welcome back. I have several questions from Tuesday's session. So let's get started with them first.
Okay.
Here we go. These are good questions, by the way. These are great. First up, why haven't I heard of charitable lead trusts before?
I think charitable lead trusts are a little bit complicated at times, or complicated for a lot of advisors. So I think advisors, if they haven't used them, I think they just shy away from it and don't recommend them. But it really comes down to charitable lead trusts have been around for a long time in the tax code, and they're a great planning tool for those that need it. So I think the reason most people haven't heard of it is because mainly the advisors aren't used to using it, and so they don't recommend it.
I think the first time I ever heard of them was back in the 80s or something with Jacky Onassis. Remember, that's a name you haven't heard for a while. But it was in the New York Times. I thought, wow, this is pretty interesting planning tool. Anyway, that's the first time I'd ever heard of them back in the day.
And I think it also comes down to a lot of clients, for these advisors may not be in the position that they think they can use the charitable planning, or in some cases, I see some of the advisors themselves are not charitably inclined, so they skip over it to other planning tools. But there again, it's a great tool for those that are charitably inclined, those that want to maybe, reduce their tax bill right now. So it's a great tool for those that understand how to use it.
Absolutely. Question number 2, is there one charity per charitable lead trust, or can you have multiple charities within one charitable lead trust?
You can have as many charities as you want for each charitable lead trust. And what that makes it great from the planning standpoint is we can set up this charitable lead trust and make sure that you're fulfilling the charitable wishes that you want. So if you've been working with a number of different charities, we can make that fit inside the one charitable lead trust.
Excellent. You touched on this in your presentation. Who controls the charitable lead trust? Good question.
So really it comes into several parts here. So if you start from the inception, when we're putting this together, you as the grantor of the trust are going to determine what the terms of the trust are. So you've got that control from the very start. when we're putting this together, we're asking you questions of, there again, what charity do you want? How long do you want the trust to last? How much do you want going to the charity? How much do you want as the residual back to you or your family? So you have the control in setting up the trust. Once the trust is set up, then the trustee is the one that controls what happens inside the trust. And you can be the trustee of the trust. So we're not taking that control away from you. Sometimes, I'll have clients that just don't want to deal with that, so they'll name somebody else as the trustee. But you can be the person in control from the very start and all the way through to the finish of the trust.
This is fantastic. Question number 4. If the donor is already past retirement and therefore has a lower income, what happens if the charitable deduction cannot all be used within the 6-year period?
If you haven't used up the deduction in the 6-year period, you're going to lose. That deduction just goes away. So really what we would want to look at is from the planning standpoint, is the charitable lead trust the right choice? So if this is really charitably, driven, if you want to make sure this is being set up for to benefit the charity now, and then have that money coming back, the residual back to you or your family, there again, this might be the right tool. If we're looking at this from purely a tax standpoint, and you're saying that I don't know if I'm going to be able to use this deduction over 6 years, then maybe we want to adjust either the amount that we put into the trust down so we have a lower tax deduction, or we may want to use a different planning strategy that fits a little bit better. There again, we don't jump into this. I use this in a lot of planning and say we're in a commoditized world. We're used to Amazon. And with Amazon, it's, if I need something now, I can get on Amazon and I'll have it probably tomorrow. And so we're used to, you buy what's off the shelf. This isn't an off the shelf, product. This is a planning tool. So we want to take that step back and say, how do we want to use it? What goals is it going to accomplish for you? And make sure that the trust is designed to fit your goals.
Absolutely. That's great. Next up, when is the best time to set up a charitable lead trust?
From a tax-driven standpoint, by December 31st. So if you want the deduction for this year, it needs to be set up by December 31st, and the asset needs to be transferred in, whether it's cash or an appreciated asset. If it's, based off of that, I can tell you this is the time of the year that we see the majority of trusts being set up. If it's one where it's more coming from the charitable giving side, then we'll set up those trusts anytime throughout the year. But the tax, from the tax side, it's either in there by December 31st or it's not.
Rick, how long does it typically take to set up a charitable lead trust? Say, I call you tomorrow, say, gosh, this is something that I want to do. How long would that take to set up a well thought through charitable lead trust, or have this discussion about charitable giving?
We'll probably, from my side of it, from the planning side, if I have time, we're going to take several weeks of going through, making sure it's the right fit, the right type of trust, what asset we're going to put into it, so that we're really taking our time and doing it right. I'll have some conversations that literally have gone on for years, just waiting for the right timing for this to happen. Now, the closer we get to the year end, those conversations happen a lot quicker. And so if I'm looking at it real time frame, if we had to have it set up in a matter of 2 or 3 days, we can probably make that happen. That's not how I like to, that's not the feel good and comfortable kind of planning. That's where rushing to meet a deadline. And if we have to rush to meet a deadline, we'll make sure it happens. But most of the time, we want to take our time, making sure that it's the right fit for you, because there again, these are irrevocable transfers. When we set up the trust, it's an irrevocable trust. When we transfer that property into the trust, it's an irrevocable transfer in. So these things are set in stone and should be looked at as being set in stone. And so we want to make sure there's no buyer's regret here. We don't want to wake up tomorrow and wish we hadn't have done it. We want to take our time and make sure we're really making good decisions. So it just is, it's going to be, driven by the client, how fast we move and how sure they are on the planning.
Right, and that irrevocability, that's what gives you the tax advantages, right? In terms of, that's where that comes from.
Yeah, if it's not an irrevocable transfer, then there is no tax deduction. The IRS is going to look at that. If you've got strings to pull it back, they're going to say it didn't happen. So we want to make sure that's why we want to take our time and do it right, so that everybody's on the same page, everybody's comfortable with the planning, and we know we're doing it for all the right reasons.
Great. Next up, how long does the charitable lead trust last?
There again, that's up to you. When you're setting up the trust, that's one of the questions we'll go through and figure out how long this trust should be set up for. There again, we talked about it in the presentation, and if you can remember the scales, as we move one thing, put one thing on one side, the other one moves along with it. So if we're looking at this purely from a tax deduction, the longer that trust lasts, the bigger our tax deduction. So if it's tax driven, we may stretch that trust out a little bit longer. If it's one that it's charitably, from a charitable, giving, scenario, we're really trying to, help that charity. Well, there again, it's how long do you want to have that payment going out to charities? Is it 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? Usually it's one. I think the longest I've ever set up a trust has been 20 years. And there again, it was not, being driven from the tax side. It was being driven from the charitable giving side. They wanted the charity to know there's going to be 20 years of payments coming in every year. Mm-hmm. And so there again, it's what are we trying to accomplish? The shortest that I've had a trust set up for was 5 years. And there again, so you look at that time frame, there's the only person that knows if that's the right length is you, because it's going to be based off of your goals and your planning. And I went through, in fact, I had a conversation with some clients and advisors this morning, and it's really, we're at the very beginning stage of this. And so I had actually put together a chart and showed them, okay, if it lasts longer, here's what those deductions are going to look like, just so that they could get that picture in their mind of what they're going to want that trust to look like. But it's there again, you're the one making that decision.
Right. Measure twice, cut once, right?
On this one, absolutely.
Next up, can the donor receive any of the income from the charitable lead trust? The donor.
And that's an absolute no. Once we move that property into the trust, the goal is, and the objective of the trust is, during the trust period, the only money that's flowing out is to the charity. That's all we're going to be, distributing money for. It will never come back to you during the trust term. You get the residual at the end of the trust. There again, that goes back to that planning, the measure twice, cut once. We want to make sure if you need money during your life, maybe we go back to what we talked about last month with the charitable remainder trust versus the charitable lead trust. There again, what are we trying to accomplish for you first? And really in this mix, and we've talked about this in the whole webinar series, we want to make sure this meets your goals. And we have to understand what your goals and objective will be. Do you need money now? Do you need money in retirement? Is this to pass more to charity, more to the family? As we balance all those things out, then we bring out the right tool, but then it's also designed the right tool.
Exactly. Next up, who manages the investments in the charitable lead trust?
You, if you want to be the trustee, and there again, you're going to name the trustee, and I would say at least 90%, if not closer to 100% that I've worked on, the individual donor is also going to be the trustee. As the trustee, you're the one that's responsible for the investments inside the trust. You're making those decisions. Now, you don't have to do those by yourself. You can hire your investment manager. And if you have an investment manager helping you on your personal portfolio, that's probably the same person that we should have helping invest in the charitable lead trust. Because there again, this property is coming back to you at the end of the trust term, and it should be managed based on your goals and objectives. We need to have enough liquidity to pay out to the charity each year, but the rest of the decisions are being based off of your ultimate goals. So you're the one making those decisions, but there again, you don't have to do it by yourself. We can get professionals to help you with it.
Excellent. Question number 9. Can I change the charity after the charitable lead trust is set up? Charity or charities, I guess, after the charitable lead trust is set up?
This is one, there again, going back to the design of the trust. You get to decide, is that charitable beneficiary going to be revocable or irrevocable? If you've got a long-standing relationship with a charity, so if you've been with Ardenwood for the last 30 years, that's where you want your benefit, all of that charitable benefit to go, then having an irrevocable beneficiary may be correct. If it's one where you've been giving money to Ardenwood, you've been giving money to the local community center, maybe some to the locals, kids, sports teams. If you've been giving your charitable donations to multiple people, or it's been changing over time, or you're just not sure how charitably inclined you are yet, then you probably want to have that as a revocable beneficiary designation, and then be able to change that and give it out to whoever you want to year by year. So it really can be the best of both worlds, but it's going to be designed for you.
Excellent. Last question. I don't have any other questions haven't come in yet. Okay, well, if anyone's thinking about questions, this is the last one that I have from Tuesday. So please formulate your questions now, please. What is the difference between a donor advised fund and a charitable lead trust? Good question.
That is, and it's a great question, because when you start looking at our different strategies, different tools we can use, a donor advised fund is designed for you to make that irrevocable gift to the donor advised fund. You're going to oversee the investments in there, just like you would have as the trustee of the charitable lead trust. And then you're going to decide each year or at what time you want to give out those charitable donations. But you get to decide who it goes to, when it goes to them. You don't have to make a distribution every year. You can skip years. And it really is when you decide when and how that gets distributed. The only restriction is it has to be made to a 501c3 charity. Now, if I'm going to look at the big difference between a donor advised fund and back to the charitable lead trust, with the donor advised fund, whatever money you put into that has to go to a charity. So it doesn't matter when it goes, but over time, it has to all go to a charity. With the charitable lead trust, we're going to have that set up so at least annually, and we can have that monthly, quarterly, semi-annual, or annual, but at least annual, that distribution has to be made to the charity. But at the end, whatever's left is going to come back to you. So there again, when we're doing the planning and we're looking at what tools to bring out, and we get into this charitable planning and charitable giving scenarios, we're going to look at how much do you want to give to charity, if that's driving it, the charitable gifts. If we're looking at tax deductions, how best to manage that. If we're looking at the needs, do you need this money to come back to you during life? Do you need that to come back to you at the end of a trust term? You know, so all of those start coming in, and all of these are great tools, and all of them are beneficial to you. They're beneficial to the charity. They're beneficial for taxes. As we start looking at that, we want to start, kind of whittling down our strategies to which one fits the best. Now, sometimes we actually get to, we may use a donor advised fund and a charitable lead trust. There might be a time where those two work together to solve the need. And I have some where we have a charitable remainder trust and a charitable lead trust, because we needed some income during this period. And then we're going to give the big endowment gift to the charity. And at the same time, we wanted to give money to charity now, but we're going to need some of that money maybe for retirement or other needs. So we can mix and match these to get to the right result. It's not an all or nothing. It's what do we need to do to fit in to get the right result?
And it can go back to you or your children or your grandchildren, right? I mean, it can go, you can skip a generation.
Yep. Yeah. It's, if you think about the charitable lead trust, that residual benefit coming back, and I tend to get a little bit short on that and just give an easy answer. It comes back to you, but it comes back to you how you want it to. So is it coming back to you? Is it coming back to you and you're fitting that into your legacy plan? So there again, you're correct. Does it go to the kids? Does it go to grandkids? Does it go in trust to, for other benefits? So it's up to you to control how that's going to be.
Absolutely. Great. Well, we're going a little short today. We're just in 20 minutes here, but those are the questions that we have. I don't see any in the queue here in the Q&A portion. So all good questions. I think this is something that people really need to think about and pray about and have a discussion with you and do some research. These are of great benefit, obviously, to charities, which is wonderful, but also to families. And it's just all centers on good planning as the whole premise of this series. So thank you, Rick, for answering these questions today. And thank you all again for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next month when we will summarize the key points covered in this series and answer any final questions. The dates, once again, are Tuesday, December 14th and Thursday, December 16th. And once again, at 4 p.m. Pacific. And we would like you to, if possible, please register today and tell your friends. Our fall newsletter, Heart to Heart, should be in the mail on Monday, so please keep an eye out for it. And finally, please mark your calendars for our online Christmas celebration entitled Sing for the King. Hopefully you've seen this invite in your mailbox. It will be on Sunday, December 5th at 2 p.m. Pacific. You can also register on our website, ardenwood.org. All are invited, so please share the news with family and friends. Wishing everyone a very happy Thanksgiving and goodbye for now.
Thank you.